but just try to stay out of my way. Just try. I'll get you, my pretty, and your little dog, too.
Oh, pleasure. Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Margaret Hamilton. Couple seconds to talk to
Al.
Mr. Hal. Would you join us up here today?
Surely. Al Roy.
Yeah. Mr. Hal Roy. And Mr. Frank Melfa. Yes, and Mrs. Melfo, scoot it to the back. Would you stand up so we can give you a round of applause, please? This is, what we'd like to do is to record the visit on tape. Is that all right?
Certainly.
Okay. Can we wire you up? Would you sit over here? I'd like us all to be together. Is that okay, Frankie? Okay.
I'd rather be together. I'm lost without
Okay.
Not really.
Margaret would have brought her broom.
Well, I did, but I didn't bring it
Would you
all.
sit right in this seat here, Miss Hamilton? Is that agreeable? Do you mind wearing a lav?
No. Not a bit.
Can I do the wiring?
Mm-hmm.
And you tell me if this is comfortable. I apologize.
That's all right.
My hands are shaking a little. This is,
Frank? Is that where I'm going?
I don't know. Right here, sir.
Oh, I'm going to be.
Yeah, I figured we would surround her and
Why not?
That way
she can't get away. Oh, thank you. Frank, I'm going to wrap you the same way. Can you reach over and turn off the fluorescence?
I've got this old stuff.
Now, I'll tell you what else let's do before we start. Let's fill his glasses, because I don't know about you guys.
You going to borrow me for a second? That's a close-up, isn't it?
Yeah, let me check.
I didn't wear my pants to this teeth.
Before we start, would you like us to hang up your coat? Would you do
Oh,
one
if you'd
for
like
that?
me to.
If, you know, it may be a little warm, as you probably know. Our lighting is not as bad as...
All right, wait just a second. There we go. Did I? Oh, here.
Okay,
There we go.
okay. You take that and hang it up, please.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's...
I had no idea we were going to have so many friends here.
Oh, this is only a fraction. That's why we're taping it, because our little room isn't big enough to accommodate everybody. And
Now, these are all members of the group?
yes, ma'am. Members and parents. And what we've tried to do is set up a little organization like the Scouts or the Y or something like that, where here the boys and girls, in addition, or instead of being interested in sports or what have you, they're actually engaged in doing motion picture production and television work. But the difficult part is we have to raise the money ourselves. And we've only been an organization for about 5 years. Yeah.
You have to turn around.
Thanks.
Get the back of your neck.
Thank you. I love working with a pro. I need all the help I can get to look good.
She's all over the world, right, Margaret?
No, we were together in Showboat.
Yeah, we trooped Showboat together, Margaret and I. She played Parthian, and I played Frank Schultz, Schultz and Schultz.
Did you both begin on the stage?
I did. I don't know about
Yes,
Margaret.
I
think you
did.
did too. Sure, I did. Yeah.
Actually, where I started was at the Playhouse in Cleveland.
Mm-hmm.
And for 3 years, I was there working with the actors, and some very professional ones, and some equity actors, and some beginners like myself. And it was a wonderful experience because it was learning by doing. And there's nothing quite like that. And I gather that's what you're doing too.
Yes, ma'am.
Is that right? Well,
Yes.
that's the best way in the world, really. Because you're not so worried about whether it's going to be successful or not. You're just enjoying it, and you know it's going to be successful to a degree because everybody enjoys it. But if you can enjoy it too, it's just wonderful. And I have always been very grateful to the Cleveland Playhouse. And they always, now they have 3 or 4, I guess they have 8 now, young beginners, and that are going through the same sort of thing that I went through. But it's a growing thing, and you do more and more and more all the time. And then you have all these different small parts, of course, at first, and that gets you feeling what it's like and easing into it. And of course, we had audiences at that time, and they had just gotten into their new building. So we had one auditorium, the main auditorium, I think 6 seats, 6 or 800, I forgot which, I think it's 600. And then we had a smaller theater. This was all new then. And they'd moved from a very little tiny church that they were using when it had become extinct and wasn't being used anymore. And then they went into this building. Now they're adding out a tremendously, another one, a new building in an entirely different area, although it's all together. And it's going to be very exciting. But it has grown and grown and grown, and I just was lucky enough to be in the very early days of it, when it wasn't, well, it was the same, it would be with any of us when we're starting out. Not the feeling of oh, I wonder if I can do that or not, or oh, I don't know if I want to try that. And because we're all doing it together, and of course, you had lots and lots of help at that place, as I'm sure you have here. I imagine you can help each other a lot, but you. And I think that's the best way, really, to begin.
But our boys and girls, a number of them, come here, 10, 11, 12, and they either want to act or work with the equipment, the technology. You originally started out not to be an actress.
Yes,
though.
that's right.
That's correct. As a matter of fact,
I taught kindergarten for 6 years. I went to Wheelock Kindergarten Training School in Boston. I had the first time I really thought that I would like to be on the stage was, of course, the senior play in high school, which is the downfall of a lot of people. Of course, they all told me I was wonderful, and all the relatives and friends and cousins and aunts and so forth all came, and all our friends, all the audience mainly was our relatives. There were about 23 girls in our class, so that was a goodly number of relatives. And everyone got that, little bit of that feeling, but I got it very strongly that then I began to wonder if I wanted to teach kindergarten. I'd always wanted to ever since I could remember. And then I decided, well, I don't know that I do or not. Then I had a singing teacher who was also my downfall. She told me one day that my voice was coming along very, very well. She said, you could never sing opera. And I said, oh, Miss Probert, I don't want to sing opera. And she said, well, that's good, dear, because you couldn't. I said, oh, well, that's all right. I don't really want to. And she said, you could be a very good concert singer. And it's a lovely kind of a life you go about. And you have your engagements, and people enjoy it tremendously. But as for the opera, I wouldn't worry about it. And I said, I'm not at all. But she said, I do want to tell you this, that this is another gift now that you have shown me. And she said, I think it's more tremendous than your singing. She said, you must do something about it. And the idea of doing anything meant just going home and telling Mother that I didn't want to go to Wheelock Kindergarten Training School the way I'd always planned. I've always said I opened my eyes wanting to teach kindergarten. And when I was all set, I was delighted until this happened. But however, I knew I was going to have to do that. And I said, well, Miss Probert, I don't know how to begin. Well, she said, first you would find a very good school. And I said, school? I said, you mean you have to go to school to act? She said, yes. I think you do. And I said, oh. But she said, you're taking singing lessons. It's the same thing. She said, they're the right way and the wrong way and everything. So she said, the thing to do is to find out what the school is. Well, she found out for me there's a school in New York called I've forgotten now what it was. It was, what it is now is the American Academy. And so that's what I was going to tell my mother. So my mother was not an ogre. Always when I tell her, she sounds as though she was simply awful, but she was very firm in her ideas and never hesitated to say what she thought you ought to do and intended for you to do. So at lunch one day when we were alone, I said, Mother, I don't know if I want to go to Wheelock. I think maybe I'd rather go to the Sargent School for Dramatic Art in New York City and become an actress. And she said, without missing a bite, you'll do nothing of the kind, dear. Then you go to Wheelock the way you've always planned, and then you can fool around with the theater all you want to. And my son said to me, well, Mother, why didn't you just say, I don't want to go there? And I said, because in those days, dear, you didn't do that. You did as you were told, and I'll tell you something. I'm very, very glad I did, because I think having the training, and I taught 6 years and loved it, but at the same time, I wasn't really disturbed about not doing this. I gave it up quite happily, but it was always in the back of my mind. And the first thing I did when I graduated from Wheelock was, which was just a 2-year course in those days, and you got your teaching credentials, but you didn't go to college. And so as soon as I got through, I went back to Cleveland, where I had a job to teach the first year in kindergarten in public school. And the first thing I did was go and try out at the Playhouse, just on the side, you see. And not having any idea of how long I was going to have to be at school. Well, the first day, I got a small part in the play, and they remembered me and so forth. And so that day, after school, kindergarten was over, we had 45 children in the morning and 45 in the afternoon. And learning 90 names in a couple of days was quite a task. I found myself quite busy and neglecting my lines and the play a little bit, and that really sort of began to tear me apart, thinking, what am I going to do? And finally, I decided that I couldn't do that, really, to do both. So I went through the play and played it, but then I said I couldn't right now, that I was too busy at school. So I taught for that year, and then I decided that I knew I'd have to do this for 5 years if I was going to become a director of kindergarten, which everybody wants to be, and you have a chance to try out. And here I was just graduating, and I was so full of ideas, as we all are when we just graduate, and just dying to do it. But I never got a chance to with this lady, because she was so efficient that she could run the 45 children very simply and put them in smaller groups, and I would sort of take care of the group that she was not working with at that time, and then she would take my group and I would take her group. But it never really worked out for me. I never got any kind of experience, and I thought, well, I could live here do this for years and never really become a teacher. So I decided to start my own, which I did. And I taught it for 3 years, and then there were one thing after another happened, and I continued to teach. And then I went to Rye Country Day School and taught there, and then came home. Because my mother had died, and I wanted to be with my father for a little while. He was having a hard time to adjust, and so I came back and started teaching again on the Lake Shore. Just a small group, I think I only had 12. That left me free in the afternoon because I could get everything ready for the next day and organized, and be at the Playhouse at 1 o'clock, which I decided to do. And so I taught in the morning and worked at the Playhouse and played small parts in the afternoon when we got around to it, playing in the evening, of course. So the next year came around, at the end of the first year, and Mr. McConnell, Fred McConnell, was the head of the Playhouse, and he said, Maggie, why don't you give up that nonsense of teaching kindergarten and come with us full time? And I said, well, it's not nonsense in the first place. He said, I know it isn't nonsense. I shouldn't have said that. But anyway, he said, I'd like to have you come here, and I think you should. I just feel very strong you should do it. Well, I thought about it, and that, of course, really, but this time got very uppermost in my mind, and so I decided to have to talk it over with my father. And he thought, to my great surprise, because in those days, had it been about 20 years before this, I was about 25 or something then, and if it had been before then. As I said, my Aunt Jenny and my Uncle Charlie would be rolling over in their grave at the idea of anybody going into the theater. Just awful idea, and that's the way they really felt about it. But for somehow, my mother had graduated. I guess the shock at lunch at time had sort of got her over the feeling that I shouldn't do this sort of thing. But also my amenability to saying, all right, that's what I'll do then, and maybe later on I can do it. I think that shocked her enough so that she was quite ready for me to go ahead and do what I wanted to do. So that's the way the whole thing started, and then eventually I went to New York, and was in a summer stock that was trying out in Greenwich, Connecticut, all new plays. Well, of course, that meant all the people who'd been trying, we called, walking the rounds, and I'm sure you've heard about that. And that's what everybody does, and even today they do. But you go to places that you know casting, and that are doing new plays, and hope that you can see someone. And I remember one time thinking that a young man that came out and said to this about 35 or 40 people, you, stay, the rest of you go home. And there's this great, oh. And as we filed out, one of the young men said, well, I hear it isn't any good anyway. And that made us feel better. And then somebody said, hey, we ought to all go over to such and such a place. They're casting the same kind of a play. Let's go. So probably 10 people dropped out and went elsewhere. But 20 of us went over to that. And that's the way it used to be. And you would go, and sometimes you'd see someone, and sometimes you wouldn't. But eventually, in the summer, there was this, Mr. Beckhart was trying out new plays, but that meant all the producers came to see you. And I didn't go into it early, that they needed an older lady to play the part that this Mr. Beckhart called me about. And he said, and I had met him before, and he said, Maggie, I wish you would come and play this part. And I said, well, what? He said, well, it's a young girl playing it. And I said, well, I don't want to take somebody's part. I don't like to do that. I don't want to take it away from her. She's not taking it away from her. She's much too young for it. You're just right. Now, come on. And I said, well, all right, I'd love to, but if you're sure. And I said, I'm sure. So went on, and she did have a much nicer part, and I played her part. Well, then I played another and another and another. And the last one we played was a play called Another Language. And that eventually was produced by Mr. Beckhart himself in the April of the year following. So that's how I got started in the theater. And it was one of those wonderful things that happened, and just like a miracle, and has never happened since to me. The play was a great success to everybody's amazement, and it ran a year. And then when people say, how'd you ever get into movies? I'm almost ashamed to tell you. It's so simple. Another Language was sold at the movies, and 4 of us were taken to play our parts in the play. And on the stage, 2 of our finest actors were playing the leads, Dorothy Stickney and Glenn Anders. And in Hollywood, Helen Hayes and Robert Montgomery played the leads. And that wasn't a bad start, So that's the way that happened. And then people see you, and other producers see you, and so forth. And little by little, other parts were there to be had. And I think I did a very funny part in a movie called Hat, Coat, and Glove. And it wasn't a very big part, but it was great fun. It was a milliner who was so thrilled to get called to be a witness against somebody, and she felt she knew exactly what she was talking about. But she was so enamored of the young man who was doing the questioning that she really just didn't know exactly how she was ever going to answer. And she kept smiling at him and stopping, and he said, go ahead, answer my question. And she said, oh, well, what was your question? That's the way it was. Of course, that wasn't very much help to her. But that was the my second part in the movies. And then that came from one to the other. And they offered me a contract. RKO did, and I decided that I wanted to go back and stay. And I work on the stage. I wanted to be on the stage more than I did in movies, although I was very excited about being, because it wasn't quite, it was a little bit unusual in those days. Comparatively speaking, not everybody got parts, and you very often, people you knew didn't very often. You never expected to get a part, so that it was fine. It was just going on very well, and other parts came along because people saw you. And the second part I had was a part that was intended for Edna Mae Oliver, and she was going to play it, of course, and she was very much taller than I am. I'm a little shorter than I was. when I was a little younger. But she was very, very tall, and I was taller in those days, but not that tall. So she was very ill, and it was, I don't think she played again after that, and died maybe a year or so after that. But they asked me, and it was a Capra picture. Of course, I knew a good deal about Capra by that time, just reading about him. And so I was very thrilled and to do it, and they had to alter all the dresses for me, not badly, but she was a little thinner than I was and a little taller. But that seemed to be worked out all right, and I played it. And then about 5 or 6 or maybe 10 years later, Mr. Capra decided to do it again with Bing Crosby. So all of us were, he liked the cast he had, and he put to great pains to find out, ferret out the ones that had played for him before. And that was an interesting experience, because Bing Crosby's an entirely different person than the, I'm trying to think of it was the young man that played the lead now, and I can't think of it. But anyway, he was a very different sort of person, and it was a musical, turned into a musical, but they were both fairly successful. But then that went along, and I went back now and then and played on the stage, which is my first love. And then I went, and did quite a few movies, and then I came along to one that has been, well, a very nice experience, but I suppose I would do it again. But it had made such a difference in my life in so many ways, The Wizard of Oz, because it stays with you whether you like it or not. And I often think, I go along the street sometimes and I'm all dressed up, and I look in the window, as you go by, and think, gee, that looks nice. And suddenly somebody says, oh, I'd know you anywhere. You played the witch in the Wizard of Oz. Well, why get dressed up if everything I went on too long, but I give you a little idea. It's up and down and up and down. All of our lives are in this, and it continues. You get to a certain age, and I'll be 80 in December, and what happens is you don't get as many parts, because there are a lot of parts that seem to me today for older women, and I've had quite a number offered, and some I would like to do, and some I would not like to do. But I've gotten to the place now where I am happily able to say, no, I think I don't want to do that. And earlier on, you never turn down anything as you all know, I'm sure. But then as you get older, it isn't quite as active a life. But it's a nice life, isn't it?
Certainly is.
Even if you have
It's
just
the last drop, too.
He's a wonderful actor, and we had the pleasure of doing Showboat together in Lincoln Center for about 17 weeks, wasn't it?
Right.
And then we went on the road a little bit, and the wonderful architect the scene designer who had designed the scene, designed the boat so big that we couldn't get it into anything except a huge, enormous place. So what was going to be a very nice run and a tour ended up with about 4 places, because there weren't.
The boat was too large.
Yeah, much too large. We had to cut out. We got the largest place we could in Philadelphia, which was Schubert, I think.
Schubert, yeah.
But that wasn't big enough, and we had to cut out all the first half where they're on the levee, and that lovely music goes da 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 da. That was all cut out, and we had to start with more of the scene itself, and it was a heartbreaker for a while. But we all, as you all do, you get through everything.
Could I ask one question? You provided the young people in the audience especially with a marvelous recapitulation of how you began, and indicated that a great deal of perseverance was involved. And I know you've been asked the question hundreds, perhaps thousands of times, but to young people, sometimes they imagine that something like a film, and especially a film that most of us have seen many, many more times than once, that The Wizard of Oz, for you personally as an actress, was not always an easy undertaking. And one of the things we have difficulty with, especially with our littler people, is explaining that it's a fair amount of hard work, and sometimes professionally there's even danger involved. And in doing homework for our visit, I discovered that for you, as a young woman, it was really dangerous a couple times.
Well,
wasn't
it was, they were absolute accidents, it wasn't really intended, but it was, would you like me to tell you what it was?
We would love
Well,
you to tell.
it wasn't, it could have been very, very tragic, but it wasn't. And what happened was that we had been working, we had to be there at 7 o'clock in the makeup chair. And at 9 you were ready, and were taken down to the this is all of us, the 3 boys, as I used to call them, and Judy, and anyone who was doing a part, one of the parts in the picture that day. And then you would start in at 9 o'clock, and you would work until 1. And in those days, they hadn't caught on to the wonderful idea of having coffee and simple food always ready for you, which they do now. Because people used to wander off and run over to the commissary or someplace like that to get something quickly and come back, and sometimes it wasn't as quick as they intended it to be, and they would hold up the picture. So there was a great definite rule against that. You couldn't do that. So then people began bringing their lunch, enough lunch to, tide you over so you could have something at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, and 12 if necessary, because you really got terribly hungry getting up so early. But this day we had left at 1 o'clock, and I've always blessed the camera union, because at 1 o'clock they had worked so many hours, as we all had, and of course their work is, they don't have the little times off that we have. They're just, right straight through, and it's very, very difficult work, especially filming a thing like that. It's not easy. And so everybody was very, very tired. And what used to happen at 1 o'clock, the lights would go out and everybody would look around. Finally, we got used to it. And the whole crew of camera had just raised and said, well, goodbye, kids. You can help yourselves, enjoy yourself. We're off to lunch. And so then, of course, there was nothing to do but let the rest of us go, which they should have done before. But anyway, this created a tremendous exhaustion that was unnecessary, because then you would go and eat, and you probably would eat too much or eat not enough, and then what you wanted to do was to go down, come back and lie down somewhere for just a short time. If they had just added on a half hour, or should have added on an hour, should have been a 2-hour lunch break. But, they were anxious and wanted to get on with it. So consequently, things like this happened. And this is where I disappeared the first time in Munchkin. And there was a little piece of machinery that was just like an elevator, up and down. It would go down quickly or it would go down slowly. And the floor was cut out where it came up, and you stood on that. Well, the only trick for me was at that moment, well, really the only trick at all was to know you have to line up with something, and you can't ever, go along and look down, see where you are, and then look up again, or you can't get into what you think your place is and glance to see if your toes are where they're supposed to be. You have to move in, and you have to have it worked out so clear, very definitely. So when you see something, let's see, while we're looking at you, that lady that's sitting, that little boy, I would know when she was known. Now she's not centered to me now. If I was going to land and look at her, I would have to be about like this, I think, and I would be fairly sure. Of course, is always a little leeway. They have to have it. So I was backing down. I just said, I'll get you and your little dog too, which is one of Richard's favorite lines for some reason. And I was furious, you see, and I flashed around, and and then Mr. Oh dear, our director, think of it in a minute, said, Maggie, don't be sure that you turn when you get standing, turn your room upside down. And I had no idea why he wanted me to do that, but I did. And then he said, pull your elbows in. And I said, well, I said, is there room? Am I going to hit the floor? No, he said, you're not, but you've got to be right in the middle. So what I did was to get one of the prop men to get down on the floor and see if he could see where my shoes were into relation to the outside of the area where the little thing I did not want to be, because this is a drop of 6 feet right straight down. and I wasn't used to doing that. But we all had stunt stand-ins, so my stunt stand-in showed me exactly what to do. She said, the minute you get on that, flex your knees, because she said, if you keep your knees like this, you'll drop, and then you'll break both your legs very easily. And I said, all right, thanks a lot. I'll do that. And that was about all she told me, but that was a very important thing. Good for you to know, too. Anybody to know, I think, if you're doing any jumping at all. So that was settled, and then he said, yes, now where you are. And then they hung something on the camera, in the center of the camera, so that if I could look, and you think, perhaps I can't, but you don't have to vary at all. You get a feeling in the first place that it's right. And it is right there. And then the cameraman would look in the camera, and he would just touch, or somebody would for him, I'm frightened, but he did it, probably somebody else did, because they were a little bit too far to do that. But he'd reach for it, just touch this little rag, a little straight rag, sort of, something like that, and he would touch it, and it was heavy enough so it would move. And if I saw it move, I knew I was okay, but until it moved, I just stayed there. Once in a while I would be off, but most of the time, we'd do this over and over again. We probably did it about 6 times, and I would drop, see. So he said, okay, now we've done that enough. Are you comfortable? And I said, yes, as comfortable as I can be. And he said, is there anything worrying you? And I said, no, not much. No, I didn't have any idea what would worry me in a short time. This is really one of the early days of the picture, and sometime during the first 2 weeks of the picture, we got to this. It's very slow work, but that was good, because at least you didn't feel rushed to do it. And this would have been impossible if you were hurrying to get in place. You just can't. You just got to time it out. So it went through, and this is what happened. There are 2 underneath the floors. There were 2 tubes. In one was smoke, very heavy smoke. Well, not too heavy. It was white, but it was you couldn't see through it, the whole point. And then the other was fire. And what happened was that you got here, and you were screaming and laughing and carrying out at the same time, and all of a sudden the smoke, you see, all comes up like this and completely envelops you. Then you are dropped down. See, that's where that you come right down, and then 3 men offhander pull a piece of pavement over the hole that's been left when I went down. And then the fire comes up and burns away the smoke, and you're gone. Well, it was a great effect, and we did it. It went perfectly, and they felt that it was an excellent shot, and they would take what they called a protection shot after lunch. That was a mistake. And I didn't know at the time, but it really was, because we were too tired. And we went to lunch. Everybody was just starving. You know, from some point you ate at home at 5 o'clock, and maybe if you had a snack or a sandwich in between. That's a long time, from 5 in the morning to 1 in the afternoon before you eat again. So, but they were saving time, and they, they get so involved they don't really know that you're uncomfortable. So we came back after lunch and started in again to have this protection shot. But that was mainly because in those days you could see the black and white almost immediately, but you couldn't see the color for about 2 weeks. So this is one of the most fascinating things that I will tell you that I didn't know right away, because I wasn't talking at that time to very many of the cameramen. There's several cameramen, I think. And but I said to him one day later on, how did you know? How did you dare to take a chance to go ahead with this thing with the expense of the color? And it was early color, and it was this beautiful color. I don't know how they got such a beautiful effect, but it's one of the best, I think, color pictures there is, really. And he said, well, I'll tell you. He said, we don't see color. But he said, we also don't see black and white. What we see is densities of a more like a gray. And we know that if it's this dense, that is red we're looking at. If it is less, it is yellow. If it is still less, it is a faint blue. If it is very much brighter, or more color, it would be a deep blue. And I said, well, how is that? And he said, because it's years and years of seeing color, but not photographing it. So that when it came out, we were looking at red and yellows and blues and greens and so forth, and everybody else was looking at black and white or gray. But he said it worked perfectly. He said that is one reason why we feel now, before we send the film to be developed, that we've got a good shot. And he said, so far, it's been right. And I said, no, so far we have done this one scene, and you've done a lot of Munchkin. And I said, was there anything before? And he said, well, I remember all the tests. We tested for almost 2 months in every area. Everybody got into their costume. And on any place that I appeared, I was tested. So there was not one place I wasn't covered. And then they could see whether the color was right. And one of the big things in my difficult, not my difficult area, their difficult area was how black. What is black? What is black? Is black black, or is it gray black, or is it blue black? Or how do we get the black black? And finally, they succeeded. And one thing that used to happen, whenever you had a black dress on, you had a little, sent out for some reason a little tiny white line at the edge of your black or your suit or whatever you had on, and a little line that went around it. So it was a little tiny piece of material. So they were trying to get rid of that because it was disconcerting. And with the collar and the sort of thing up, you have this white going around. Well, they were doing their best, and finally they covered it. They did it with that costume. They got the black that would not emanate this, or whatever you call it, a little white line. And they also got the black they wanted, which was a deep midnight black, really. And so anyway, to go on with this, what happened? I fell down, or I went down, and somebody was holding a platter of buttons. And the only thing I can think of, I don't know what those buttons were, but I saw them doing this in various times, which was a signal for, I think, something to happen, a certain kind of color or something. Anyway, nobody knows whose fault it was, and it was nobody did it on purpose, so it was a complete accident. And there was, fortunately, nobody to blame. Nobody knows to this day what happened, why it happened. But anyway, what happened was I came down, the roll call came up, I dropped, and as I dropped, I felt this warmth on my face. Now, you know how fast you drop, especially your body, and of course you're being, the floor's left you, and you drop. And what happened was, in that second, someone turned the fire on just a little too soon, you see, because they had to pull this thing over, and we had to be sure that the hat was out of the way and all that sort of thing. And so that it was quite a little bit too soon. And what I felt was just this warmth on my face. And we went down, and there were two gentlemen down below. I never understood exactly why, but my son told me, well, Mother, that was in case you broke both legs. There'd be one man for each leg. Carry you out. And I said, oh, I see. Well, that probably was it. And anyway, I went down, and I didn't know anything had happened to me at all, except that suddenly these burning things. I said, what's that? And they said, oh, your hat and your broom caught fire. This is these gentlemen that were standing. I said, oh, for the Lord's sake. And then somebody came rushing down the stairway that I was going to go up, had everything going right. And they said, quickly, come with me quickly. Well, the wonderful thing about this was that Jack Dawn, who was the finest artist as far as makeup, I think this motion picture colony ever had. He was by head and tails above everybody else. And the things that he invented, he had a new kind of rubber that went on our faces that came over much easier than the other. I think by the time we had done it so many times, and we were in the picture long enough so that I think that eventually you wouldn't have much skin on your face. But this came off very much easily, and it was lighter. And you know, they made my nose larger, which I could never understand. And then they had a bigger chin down here. And then, of course, all of us had various, except Judy, had various things, you know. The lion had these wonderful things out here, and of course the scarecrow was all pink, and lots of it, so that it was a beautiful job. But what he told, we each had a makeup man that went right through the picture with us, and he told them every single thing that was in the makeup. Every boy, a young man took care of me, was just wonderful. He stayed with you all the time, and he, touched up your makeup as you needed as you went along, and each of us had one. And he knew what was in this green that they put on my face, and it was copper. I didn't know about this. And he knew that if the copper, if it wasn't taken off instantly with any kind of a result of fire like this is something they had considered, because after all, it was dropping through it. I could have been scarred for life, because copper eats into your skin, and if any of it was left on, it would just, I would have been full of holes. In those days, they didn't have the kind of surgery that they have now to put things right. But because he did know, he rushed me to them. And I really still didn't, I wasn't feeling anything. I didn't feel anything at all on my face until I got into the chair. And he said, "No, this is going to hurt, Meg." He said, "I want you to put this towel between your teeth and just bite on it." And I said, "Oh," I said, "really, I don't need." He said, "Just do as I tell you." I said, "All right." And so then he started working on it. And of course, in a very short time, it was just breathtaking. It was so painful, but it had to be done. And he said, "I have got to get this off." He said, "I can't stop, tell you now, but will stay with me. I've got to get this off." And because he knew that if any of it was left out, that wouldn't happen. Well, he got it all off, and there was a mass of bandages, and I went home. And I was home for 6 weeks, and the unfortunate part was they didn't need me for 6 weeks either. I could have had a vacation all that time. But I was in bed part of the time, and it healed, and when I went back, I wasn't able to put, I had what you call a 3rd degree on my hands and 2nd on my face, and it went up like this. Your eyelashes were gone, and the upper part of your lip was burned, and the eyebrows were gone, and part of the hair up here, not very much of it. But in the long run, it was not such a frightful amount of damage. But the hands were rather bad. And he said, well, the doctor looked at the bandages. My doctor came right away to the house as soon as I got home. And this is one of the most interesting things. I mustn't go on too long, but to me, it was awfully interesting, is that when I had a very dear friend of mine visiting me, and she took my car was at the studio, so she brought her car over and picked me up. Nobody offered to send me home a limousine, which of course I thought they do. Nobody said anything about a doctor, because the makeup man was in a way a doctor, as much as he could do, but they bound it all up. But they did put a wonderful thing called butylene pectrate on me, and it was, I think, something discovered in the Second World War, but he just plastered it on, and it almost immediately stopped the burning that was so hard at first. It just, some of those things that happen to you where you just can't breathe, it hurt so, and then this began to ease off, and then bandaged me all around, bandaged both my hands. There was nothing on the one hand, it was just forgotten. I thought it was like a golf hold. One hand had gone over a little, and I think that this was the hand that was not, but this head was a 2nd degree burn. And then the main burn was on my face, but at the same time, in a very, very small area. So, no, I guess it's just the opposite. The hand was the worst thing. That wasn't ready to be, had makeup on when we had to go back 6 weeks later. So the doctor said, you cannot put that. So he called and said, don't dare to put makeup on that. Not ready. And I said, there's too much moisture still oozing, and you cannot do it. So what they did was get me green gloves, and you don't know it, but most of the rest of the picture, I wore my hands were in these green gloves. But it was great because nobody really, realized it. And then the nails, of course, were pasted on the outside, the gone nails that she had. But there were many very interesting things in that. But one of the things was that the second day I was home, I had not gotten out of bed as yet, and my young son went to nursery school. And when I called and told Helen to please ask our wonderful housekeeper not to let him be there when I came home, take him out for a walk or do something, and tell him that I wouldn't be home that night for dinner, but I would see him and kiss him goodnight and see him when I got home. And of course he never was awake when if it was something late I couldn't do it, but he thought it was all right, so he thought he'd been kissed anyway. And of course he had, but he was not awake when I came, and so she took him off. And she said, Mother will be back later, she'll be back late tonight. And we put me in a room where he would not be apt to go or see me, and so that worked out all right. But the next morning, she went to nursery school, and the next morning the doctor came, and while he was there, the telephone rang, and it was MGM calling to see how I was. Now, if I had answered the phone, I wasn't feeling any pain at that time, and I would have said, oh, no, I'm fine, no, I'm not in pain. And of course that would all have been taken down, I think, by a stenographer, because I'm sure what was really worrying them was that I was going to really soothe them. And of course, as my doctor said, if you don't sue, you're crazy. He said, I'll be your best and first witness. He said, this is carelessness and has no place. He said, it's the most dastardly thing I've ever witnessed. He said, I just can't get over it. He said, well, you know, those things happen. I didn't say if I get burned, I'm going to sue you, or if anything happens to me. You can't do that. You just have to take everything in your stride. I said, it's all right with me. And I said, I just feel very lucky to have you, and I think, as you think, that it's going to be all right. So anyway, the thing that to me is so strange, nobody ever sent me any flowers. It was very near Christmas when we did it, and I had planned a great big party for two friends, other friends that were visiting me, as well as my best friend. And I think it was a New Year's Eve party, and we decided to go anyway. So I still was bound up and all this stuff, and the doctor wrote, you know, Merry Christmas on my headgear and so forth. And we really had just a great time, and it was fun. But the interesting thing to me was they were so careful, so careful. They, not the director, not Mr. Mayor, not anybody sent me a Christmas card or a flower or anything, and no call from anybody like that, just from the people that were working, and I think they probably were just scared to death. And I'm not going to go into this, but there was a worse accident the day I came back to work, after I could come back in 6 weeks, and I declined to do it. And they said, oh, come on. I said, no. I said, you know very well, if that had been Mr. Mayor instead of me, you would have the suit of your life, and he'd win it. And I said, I'm not doing anything more like that. I have a little 3-year-old boy. I had no business doing it in the first place, but I didn't think, and I didn't realize I could have easily been killed. And there he would have been without his mother. Of course, he probably would survive beautifully, but still, I was not willing to settle those terms for anything like this. And but there was always that don't talk about it, let's not talk about it. But they had to a little bit about this, you see, because I just brought it up and I said, you know, you have no right doing things like this. I know you didn't mean to. I know it was an accident, but it could have killed me just as easily as not. So I'm not doing it. I said, if you want to get, anybody can play this part now. You can get anybody that can do it. All they have to do is get the makeup on. Nobody will know the difference. Plus with what Jack Dawn can do to nose and chin and so forth, it'll be the same person. That's it. And if you want me to do it, I will gladly resign. And I'll take what salary I've earned and go my way. But I will not do anything like this again. Just let's get that clear. And then they began trying to tease me. And I said, no, nothing is going to make me do it. Just remember my small son. That's all you have to do. I'm not going to do it. So I didn't, and so my stand-in did. And she was in the hospital for about 6 weeks. They wanted to show me skywriting. The smoke all coming out of the back of the room. And I said, well, what is the smoke made of? Said, oh, it's absolutely harmless. And I said, well, I said, well, tell me, what is it you want me to do? And I said, no, I'm not going to do that, not for anything. That doesn't sound very funny to me, and I'm not going to do it. I said, supposing it blows up. Well, it can't blow up. We use this stuff in airplanes. We use it with people going on the street. It can't blow up. He said, it'll steam up and all that, but it won't blow up. And I said, no, absolutely no. So she did it, bless her heart, but it was lucky to walk again eventually. She had a very, very bad accident. That was the next day, the day that I was to come back. I did a shot in the morning on the thing. That was bad enough. It was 40 feet up in the air, and they had a pit there where the camera was, so that it had a great effect. And you were sort of holding on to nothing, and on this big saddle, you see, under which the broomstick was. And they were moving it back and forth and so forth, and I was screaming and laughing and carrying on. And then it was over. And then they wanted it. She was with this smoke all coming out of the back. And I said no, and that's where the trouble came. And it took the steel saddle and bent it, and right in half, and broke it in the middle, and that's what cut her right to the bone. So I would have been in the hospital for 6 weeks if I hadn't said no. But there were other accidents, but nothing quite as bad as those two. And that was early. That was really in the beginning of the picture. But it was kind of marvelous because everybody had a good feeling of morale about it, and I didn't die, and it was all right.
Did you actually have an opportunity to work extensively? A number of your scenes were with a number of the players other than the principals. And I would imagine that you have been asked any number of times how you as an actress, and certainly as a person, made out with the other performers. And I'd just like to make this one observation. I have read it. I now see it for the first time. We've had a chance to meet some of the contemporary actors and actresses. And you are one of the most articulate people.
Well, you know I'm a woman, and I never have
no,
stopped talking.
it's more than that. You are able to not only tell a story, but you're so generous with your experiences to young people who, like little sponges, are so eager to learn. And so many of the professionals today don't seem to ever, off camera, have ever gotten beyond the grunt groan stage. At one point, this was supposed to be, the end thing. And it's so nice to talk to somebody who is able to communicate so effectively. I wonder, did you find, or does memory provide you with pleasant remembrances of those scenes that you did play with individuals who, like yourself, have become classics in so many lives? Judy Garland and Ray Bolger and Burt Lahr and Jack Haley. What was this a pleasant experience,
yes.
Or were they all?
I tell you, dear, I wasn't very often with him.
Yeah, that's.
So I really can't judge, but I loved them all, and we had a very, very nice relationship. The only thing that disturbed me, and this was after, was that they, having been brought up in early circumstances that are good, good practice, but they never could resist doing something if they saw an opening to do something funny that they thought was awfully funny, and maybe it was, and maybe it wasn't. But they were always sort of cracking on question-wise. And one of the things I didn't care about hearing, and so I said, I think you better clean up, boys. I said, this is fun, but we're standing around here and I can't avoid it. And I said, I don't want to avoid it, but I don't want to hear it either. So they said, oh, well, we're getting all hot and bothered here, aren't you? And I said, no, I'm not getting hot and bothered. I just don't want you talking like that. And I said, mainly, I don't like Judy to hear it. She said, oh, Judy. I said, no, she's not an old warhorse at all. She's 17. So don't give me that stuff. And I just try and calm down. And because they think they took it very well, but and they didn't for that time. They were telling stories that they're not necessary to tell right in front of everybody, not anything like that. But other than that, we really got along just beautifully, and it was you see, you're all in your parts. It's hard for me to tell you. That happens, I think, in any acting. You're so in your part that you don't stop to think. I love Judy anyway. Everybody loved Judy. She was darling and very, very helpful. And I must tell you that she was also preparing herself for her final examinations in high school. At the same time, she was in this picture. We had a little place that was sort of curtained off that was her schoolroom, and there were 2 chairs and a table in there. Sometimes there was a teacher, sometimes there wasn't. And she would, as soon as she got through the scene, she always knew every line perfectly, and off she'd go to her classroom and go on with her studies. And then they'd say, okay, Judy, come on, we're ready. And she'd come out and we'd have another scene, and then off she'd go again. To me, it was just miraculous. She was the most cheerful, most thrilled little girl, really, and she was a little girl then. She was what, 17, will never be again, because I think 17-year-olds now are much more sophisticated and have had much more experience, and I suppose some are, but in general, there's a difference in children today, and that's all right. That's part of the world. Oh, all right, straight down. I think children are absolutely marvelous, and I'm thinking of some of you I'm looking at still as children, but you're not. But the thing is that there was a lovely repartee. Everybody, as I said, loved her. She was the key person in the thing, and she was the star, and she was the most important of all. And everybody, and each person had a marvelous chance to show off if they wanted to do what they had to do. They all each had individual songs and individual things. Somebody said, gee, they should have given you a song. I said, oh, no. I'm much too excited to go singing around. I wouldn't be doing anything as relaxing as singing. And I'm so too busy with this cauldron and trying to decide what we have. And that's one of the things I loved was that scene about the cauldron. She said, now let's see, what shall we have? Something with boys. Boys. Puppies will do. Puppies will put them to sleep. Puppies. But in general, the atmosphere of the place was very, very pleasant. But I'm only in the picture 12 minutes. And
how can you possibly say, in all modesty, that they could have put the makeup on anyone, and anyone else?
Oh, well, you really could. I really mean that. You know that's possible. It had to be done.
Maybe in
It
some
really-
cases, but not yours.
I don't think in your particular case, Margaret.
I don't think so. I think that's very gracious.
Well, now
of
look,
you.
they had to do it. They had Buddy Ebsen, was going to do the Scarecrow, and then they decided. I forgot. Oh, the awful thing happened. No, Buddy was going to do the Tin Woodman.
Yeah.
And they were using, instead of what they finally used, they were using a gray powder that had what would that be? There was some very bad thing for people's skin in that. Oh, anyway, what happened was that they blew it on, just blew it on the powder on his face. Well, of course, inevitably, it went into his lungs. And he nearly died. He was in the hospital for quite a while. And they thought several times they weren't going to pull him through. And the strange thing, there are marvelous things about people in high up with Mr. Mayor, and there's strange things about it. But he kept calling. I'm sure he didn't himself call, but he had a secretary. He kept calling Buddy all the time, saying, when are you coming back? When are you coming back? When do we start this picture? What's the matter, Will? And instead of finding out what was the matter, they kept doing this. And finally, the doctor stepped in and called Mr. Mayor and said, look, if you want a suit on your hand, I'll be happy to give you one. But you are making it impossible for that man to have the rest that he needs. And I don't want anybody calling here ever again until I say so. And hung up, and that was the end of that. But those things are so strange, so hard to understand. But so then they had to get a replacement, which was Jack Haley.
Jack
Haley, yeah.
Haley.
And the thing that I don't know, you have a feeling about that. I think he is so wonderful because he does practically everything with his eyes and his voice. And there is a faint sort of smile, and there's also everything that you can do with your eyes. But that's really what it is, because all the rest of it is supposedly immobile. It's just absolutely stiff. And I think he is one of the character that he portrays. He himself is a very sweet person. And I love that. I loved his character because he was anxious. He wanted terribly much to have a heart. He really needed a heart. At the same time, he was very hopeful and very agreeable to do anything that he was asked to do or to go along with it. But I thought the look to see, that's one of the wonderful things about the picture. I think when people are not even knowing that they're being watched, maybe they don't even know they're in the camera very often, they don't know. But the reaction of all those people, sometimes when you're seeing it again, take a look. Don't keep your eyes just on Judy, which we all want to do, but look at the others, because you get so much from just a little movement of the face. But and then they had those lovely songs to sing, all which depicted what they were and how they felt. And they were all so dear. I thought all those characters were so loving and so sweet.
I'd like to ask you a couple more questions before I do, while we have the opportunity to at least speak to these gentlemen. Go over here. We were trying to prepare our audience for everybody. And I would like you to comment on the song Zing Went the Strings of My Heart.
1936. Show called Thumbs Up. Eddie Dowling, Ray Dooley, Clark and McCullough, Eunice Healy and myself. Eunice Healy and I introduced the song,
That's
Zing
right.
Went the Strings of My Heart. Yeah, 1936. Never became a hit until Judy did it years later. It was never a hit in the show.
Really?
It wasn't a hit for 10 years, and Judy made a recording. It was a backside, I don't know what the other side was, of a record, and it became a hit.
Did you also start out as a young person who wanted to be in the theater? And interestingly enough, you were very successful in both mediums.
Well, yes, I wanted to be in show business, I think, like Margaret did. It's a funny thing about show business. When you said is it dangerous, show business is dangerous because you'll work a day, your show will close, and you never know if you're going to have another job or not. So that's dangerous. You have to exist. But the beauty of show business, and what I loved about it, was the fact is that I enjoyed dancing. I enjoyed the people I had met. Eddie Leonard was my inspiration. Now, he was a great minstrel man. This goes back in the 20s, and I was just a kid. Eddie Leonard was probably the greatest soft shoe dancer that ever lived. He would do a soft shoe dance with half a glass of water on his head, never spill it. And he was just beautiful. He would just glide across the stage. Well, I admired him so much, and he was the one who encouraged me to continue on in the business. But I started with Ziegfeld. I was only 15 years old when I was in the Ziegfeld Follies. That was the Ziegfeld's last show in 1931, and he died a year later. And while I was in the show, Warner Brothers started to do the Harold Teen series, college series. It was written by Carl Eade, the cartoonist out of Chicago, Herald Tribune. And I was making short subjects at Warner Brothers, Avenue M in Brooklyn, where we were talking about that before, the old Paramount Astoria studios. And Jack L. Warner's daughter was really the one who was really responsible for me going into the features, because I was making short subjects while I was in a Broadway show. So that's how my career really got off winging. But as you said before, the first love is the stage. You just can't, there's nothing like the stage. It's spontaneous. You get a reaction immediately. With a film, it's cut, you say two lines, close up, cut, and you lose the whole trend. And I must tell you a very interesting story about Harold Teen that I think is very cute. Mervyn LeRoy is a tremendous, in those days, on a Warner lot, one of the greatest directors of all time, like Frank Capra. And I had never been in California in my life. I was only in a small studio in Brooklyn doing these, which was a subsidiary to Warner Brothers. So when I went up the coast to do the picture Harold Teen, which was my first feature, we did about 20 of them all together. However, I had the script in my arm, and I had makeup at like at 7 o'clock in the morning, and nobody told me what sound studio to report to, what sound stage. So I'm supposed to be there at 8:30, and it's 11 o'clock, and I'm walking around trying to find out. And I walk in, and the red light's on. I have to wait till the red light goes off. In front of me, I see Leroy Productions, and I walk through the door, and they're shooting a desert scene. And my script has nothing in it about a desert. And I'm waiting and waiting and waiting, and nobody says hello, good morning, how are you? Now, I've only been in California now 5 days. I've never been there before in my life because I'm from the stage. So finally I thought, I better be heard from. I'm starring in this picture. They better know I'm here. So I walked over to the fellow who was making all the noise, which was the director, and I said, I want to tell you, I said, I'm here. Anytime you want to get started with me, I said, I'm ready to go to work. But there's nothing in this script that I have in my hand here that says there's a desert scene. I said, when'd you write this thing in? He said, what are you talking about? I said, there's nothing in this script that has a desert scene. He said, who are you? And I looked at him, I said, I just came out from New York. What do you mean, who am I? I said, my name's on the door. He said, what's your name? I said, Leroy. My first name is Hal. I said, what's your name? He says, Leroy. That's my name on the door. He said, get the Mary H. out of here. It's Verbal Leroy. He was the director. That's how I met Verbal Leroy. That's the story. It's true. So we became very good friends over that. But, oh, I had some experiences out there too, like you've had, doing pictures. I was signed. This is a true story. I was signed. I went back to New York, and I did a show called Strike Me Pink. This is now 1934. In 33, I did the first Herald team, and I was on a contract, but in my contract, I could go back to New York in between pictures and work vaudeville or clubs, whatever it might be, which was very lucrative and very to my advantage, actually. But anyhow, I was signed, I was loaned by Warner Brothers. Now, those days was stock. I was on stock with James Cagney, was on stock, Dick Powell. Dick Powell was a house MC in Pittsburgh, Enright Theater outside of Pittsburgh. He had a little four-piece band. Betty Davis, all those people, we were all on the stock. Frank McHugh, Pat O'Brien, everybody. George Raff was a dancer, he used to flip the coin. But anyhow, I'm signed for a picture for Columbia. I go out there, and they're shooting, and the director was named Al Rogel, and this was a picture of Jimmy Durante, Gertrude Nielsen, Rhonda Fleming. Oh, I had a whole group of them. And it was this picture called Start Cheering. An original Three Stooges, who later became very famous for their short subject. However, I'm a reporter on a Monday morning, right? I go to the gate, and you have to tell your name, and they have a list, He said, what's the picture? I said, Start Cheering. He said, what's the name? I said, Hal Leroy. He said, there's no name here by the name of Hal Leroy. I said, well, I just came out from New York. He said, well, you're not in this picture. I said, I have to be in this picture. I signed a contract, and I'm supposed to start today. And I didn't know who the director was. And I was living at the Roosevelt Hotel those days. Well, I went back to the hotel. I went 5 days, at 8 o'clock in the morning. In 5 days, they had no name. In 5 days, I went back to the hotel. So I called my manager up in New York. I said, you want to know something funny? I said, are you sure this is a picture I'm supposed to do? He said, why? I said, because they won't let me in through the gates. I said, this picture's been going on for a week now. And I said, I can't get through the gate. So he said, well, there's got to be some mix-up here. So I said, well, you better straighten it out and call me back at the hotel. Now, this is around 11 o'clock in the morning, which is 8 o'clock in New York. So I get back to the hotel, and around, I say an hour later, my phone rings with my manager. He said, everything is cleared. He said, they didn't get your contract. They didn't know you were in the picture. So I go to report to Al Rogel, and he said, what are you doing here? I said, I'm supposed to be in this picture. He says, I have nothing in here for you. I said, well, just pay me the money. Just let pay me out. I said, I've been going to go back to New York. He said, oh no, I can't do that now. But he said, we didn't know you were on a picture. So they wrote me in. It was a college type of thing. But Jimmy Durante as an absent-minded professor who couldn't remember anything, and I was a whiz kid, and I couldn't remember anything either. Because every time I'd get on a set, I never had a script. They'd say, here, Hal, they'd give me 3 pages. These are my lines. They made no sense, except I would follow him around going. So, the only good thing about that picture was that I got paid very well. But other than that, so you talk about business, show business. This is show business. You can walk in the doggone this things, you never know what you're walking into.
Did it bother you for a period of time, as Ms. Hamilton has indicated, she, after all these years, is still identified so strongly with that one role? In your particular case, if we were getting ready for this visit, you talk to different people, the first thing they would say would be Harrelton.
Right.
Harrelton.
That's true.
And yet, all the years on Broadway, all the singing, does it bother you to be?
You know what bothers you?
What?
I'll tell you what bothers you. Commercials. Now, you did all those wonderful background. I made a commercial for Arthur Treacher's Fish and Chips. This is about 3 or 4 years ago, right? About 3 years ago. Anyhow, I'm flying down to Miami to do the big convention. Now, I've been in this business 15 years. That's in 1931. I get off the plane, and I'm going through the corridor, and there's a party of about 4 or 5 people, and they're in their, I say their 30s and 40s, and this one fellow is staring at me. And I know he's trying to think, who am I? Who am I? And as I pass him, maybe I'm from here to the first chair there, he turns around and says, "Hey, you." I said, "Yes." He says, "Aren't you Fish and Chips?" You know my name, I was Fish and Chips. So I blew 40 years in this business for building a reputation. I became Hey You Fish and Chips. Great career. No, it doesn't. It doesn't really bother me, but it's ridiculous. But it's a whole new business, am I right? It's a whole new business. Whole new business. You're talking about the old days, the Ziegfeld, the Dillingham, George White, Earl Carl, all those great producers. The theater was a family affair, both stage and audience-wise. The theater, when you went to a Broadway show, you could bring your family, your child, anybody. You go to a Broadway show today, it's X-rated. It's no more of a family affair. No longer. It's a changed business.
You mean family going?
Family going, sure.
That's a shame.
Vaudeville was the same way. Backstage in the old days of vaudeville, the Keith time, which I played many a time on the Keith time, if you used any profanity such as damn or hell, you were canceled. You were canceled. They would cancel your 40-week contract. You'd be fired if you used anything like that. Today, it's a different business. Different show business. It isn't, I don't think it's in the plane it was, the high level it was in the early. Pictures, yes. Television has a lot to do with it.
In what respect do you think?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. For character people, at least for my end of it, I always say the men, have always gotten it better because there are always more parts, like the cowboys and all those things. Well, we don't. There are one or two women in a cowboy picture with lots and lots of men, but not much more than that. And now it's very interesting because there was always lots of work for character women, and it was a sort of part you actually play. And when people sometimes say to me, "Oh, you play all those mean people with those aprons and stuff like that, don't you?" And I said, "Yes, I do." And he said, "Yeah, well, goodbye," And that used to always get me because, well, I'm mean parts. Well, they're not really mean, but the thing is that now they don't have even the mean parts. They used to have. There's no need, not nearly the need nor call for women character people as that there was. There was always lots to do. I haven't had. Well, of course, I'm lots older now, and that makes a difference. But there are older parts too. But there's not as much activity. We all us character women agree to that there just isn't nearly as much work these days because the pictures are different. Maybe you have one lady, maybe you have a lady answering the door, or maybe you don't. And that has to do something, I think, with the difference in our lives now. Most everybody answers their own door, I would say, by far. Some people have help that answer the door and do those sort of duties, but for the most part, mother answers the door or a little sister or somebody, if you're talking about something like that. There isn't the need, and so there isn't in pictures. They don't want to portray family life as something else than it is, and so I think people try to follow, if it's a homey sort of a story, the circumstances that really take place.
Frank, you go back a few years yourself.
Yesterday.
Yesterday. No further than that. Would you share with our boys and girls how you became involved in the...
Well, I was maybe fortunate and unfortunate because I came in at the tail end of all this greatness. I met Hal at the very start of being in a band. I was the house musician at the Palace Theater in Youngstown, Ohio. By the way, we're all from Ohio, so we stick together now. But I started out as a musician, and I was a concert violinist. And from there, it just developed into getting into the Army and Special Service and directing plays. And then I went to the Royal Academy in London. But as a young actor, I was looking for parts that weren't around. They were saying, "You're too young, you must be older." Now I'm older, they're looking for younger people. Something's wrong with the business,
How do you maintain your own sense of equilibrium in a situation like
Well,
that?
I've accepted it at the very beginning because I never looked for work. as a musician, I was always called, so I never made the so-called rounds. You didn't have to do that. When I went to London, I was an oddity because I was an American, and I was playing parts there that were different than English people could play, and so that helped there. But coming back to New York, I was not the oddity anymore. I was an American with a British accent, and they didn't use anyone with a British accent because they couldn't get a work permit for me. I said, but I'm an American. Why can't I work with a British accent? So it was up and down. And of course, television was just starting here in New York when I arrived in 1950. It was all live performances. It was a frightening thing for an actor. If you had to look for the red light, or watch that you didn't face the red light, and all you were concerned about was your lines, and here you're looking at lights. Why bother with lights, I'll never forget when I was in the production of Macbeth that Charlton Heston did in New York. We were rehearsing the fight scenes, the swords and everything, and one actor said to the choreographer of the fencing, "Can I show you something that'll just..." He said, "What do you want?" He said, "Well, when they come at me, and I get to the star, I'll just attack him." "Well, let me see it." So we were rehearsing at the old Capitol Hotel there on 8th Avenue. That's now an old age home, I think. And the actor went right through the wall. he bounced up, went through the wall, and he disappeared. I said, "Well, you can't work it." But then when we got on the set was no bigger than this, and we're waiting in another room for our cue. We watched the monitor. What a way to make a living, You hear you're an actor, and the cameras are waiting. You're waiting for a cue on camera to run in and start, and all you had was this much room to fight. Oh, it was terrible.
It's nice to hear you say that. I hope everybody else appreciates the fact that even the biggies have to deal with small budgets occasionally. Roger Gordon is racing back and forth in the back, and I really don't want to throw your schedule off anymore. I want to ask our audience to cooperate in one respect. We'd like to take one or two still pictures, if we could, for each one of you to remember us by. And this is almost laughable, but a couple of weeks ago, this book was recently published, Behind the Filmmaking Scene, and we're very proud of it because the photograph here is from one of our productions, and we are mentioned, and you'll see a lot of interesting illustrations. We're trying, and I have inscribed each one.
Thank you very
Al,
much. Thank you.
Lovely. It's the nicest gift we could have. Thank
Well,
you so
bless
much.
your heart. You're very gracious. Frank?
Thank you very much.
And if you'll all be
Appreciate it.
patient for a moment, I'd just like to shoot one or two pictures.
Is
The
that,
other,
is that the same? Your
that's
scene?
our scene, yes.
Okay,
That's our cameraman right over there, who hopes someday to be a big star.
I'm sure you will be.
Well, if he learns to get places on time, I'm sure he will. The other thing is the pictures.
Stay on that side of the camera.
Yeah. I'd like each one of you, if you would, just to, all we have to do is ask you just to sign this, and then we're going to lay these
Right.
over our photos, and we'll trust that Roger will see.
You want just the signature?
If you would, please. Okay? And then we'll see that you folks get copies of the...
I appreciate it very much.
Oh, no, we appreciate it,
What?
believe me.
I'm delighted to be here. I heard so much
You want
about
a
it.
separate piece of paper?
It's perfect.
Rather
Anyway,
unique.
we'll take it anyway. This is just wonderful. We so rarely have an opportunity to deal with such distinguished company. Yeah, I'm just going to move these 1 second. I'll ask you to bear with me. All right. Very good. There's one picture I have to get. Come here, sweetheart. You will bear with me. It's been 5 years, ladies and gentlemen. This is my Becky, and I promised I would like to get one picture right up here. We sit in Daddy's chair. we are a family of fans that go way back. Do you mind?
No, of course not.
Fire away, gentlemen. This is
Or that's all right.
okay. That's great. Okay, now look, you sit over here. She seems to be a really nice lady. You sit on this stool. And I don't think she's going to cast a spell on you. Okay? How's that? Okay? Yeah, daddy with the teeth. Pull back and get some wide shots. Get the whole dais so we can all be here together. And I want to ask you one question, if I can. You make this comment about seniors. Oh, sorry. Okay. I want to ask one question, if I can. Where, and this is my last one, Roger, where do you get all the energy? Becky's mother and I, about 5 or 6 years ago, had the pleasure of seeing you do a little night music. And to be truthful, you were on and off, and on and off, and on and off, and there was a tremendous amount of motion. We caught the matinee, and you went on in the evening, and one wonders where you draw all the energy from.
Well, you remember I was in a wheelchair, for one thing. I only stood on my feet once during the play, but that really doesn't, and I'm just jesting because that really doesn't have very much to do with it. I think I suppose it comes from God. I think I was born with it, and I feel very lucky. I've always had it, and I don't know how much longer I'm going to have it, but I hope I will. And I've always had it. It's just always been part of me, and I've never really questioned about where it came from. I don't always get the rest I should. I think all from the theater do not, and you go vastly beyond sometimes your strength, but for some reason it's always there. And I know everyone I know that ever been on stage stands in the wings of opening night, and it is getting nearer and nearer and nearer, and your heart is going like lickety cut, and you think, why in God's name did I pick this up to do? Because it's such agony, and the minute you get on, I'll not say the minute, about 3 minutes after you're on, and your voice comes out correctly, and the words come out correctly, you begin to relax, and then you really enjoy it. But I think it takes, every one of us, I have to have that energy.
Sure.
I think it's part of the theater.
Well, when they say 5 minutes before curtain, that's when you start to, you can be so tired, all of a sudden you just miss it.
Yes,
When you hear the overture, well, you're sailing,
Yeah,
you're all sailing. You just, it comes. From out of nowhere, it just comes.
You feel that way too?
I never had it. I never, no,
Well, you've done pretty well.
I've done, oh, I've been lucky.
I didn't know you didn't have energy. I think you have loads of energy.
On behalf of all
I
of
wake
us,
up in
because
the end.
God knows what a very busy schedule you folks have, God bless all of you.
Well,
Thank you so
thank
much
you.
for being with us. I'm sorry.
Does somebody take my,
I know.
just take my,
I get starstruck. Okay. Where's your coat?
oh, here it is.
What's your stick?
Yeah, well, thank you.
And that's our pleasure.
Just lovely.
American Beauty.
Oh, I'll share it. Share them with all of us.
And we wish you continued success. We carry these out to the car.
Spend a delightful experience.
Thank you very much.
And once more.
I see you all.
Yeah.